More than 14 million Americans over the age of 55 are losing their central vision right now. Not because of a sudden accident, not because of a diagnosed disease they are actively treating, but because of a slow, silent collapse happening at the back of the eye, one damaged cell at a time, that most people will not notice until 30 to 40% of their macular tissue is already gone. That number is not a projection. It is the current reality documented by the National Eye Institute. And here is what makes it dangerous. It does not hurt. There is no alarm, no flashing light, no morning where you wake up and know something is wrong. The damage accumulates in silence while you go about your day, assuming your vision is simply changing because you are getting older. You accept it, you adjust, you buy stronger reading glasses, you sit closer to the screen. You tell yourself, this is just what happens after 50. But it is not just happening to your eyes. Think about the last time you walked down a flight of stairs in dim light and felt a flicker of uncertainty. That half second where your foot hesitated because your brain could not quite calculate where the next step was. Think about the last time you reached for something on a low shelf and misjudged the distance slightly, or stood up too fast and felt the room tilt before your body caught itself. You probably dismissed every single one of those moments. Most people do, but those moments are not random. They are connected. They are the downstream consequence of a structure inside your eye called the macula degrading faster than your body can repair it. When the macula loses density, it stops sending the brain precise depth information. And when the brain stops receiving precise depth information, your balance system, which depends on visual input to calibrate every step, begins to malfunction. This is the link that almost nobody talks about. Vision loss and fall risk are not two separate problems of aging. They are the same problem wearing two different faces. Falls are the leading cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries in adults over 65 in the United States. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that one older adult dies from a fall-related injury every 19 minutes. And the research published in the journal Ophthalmology found that adults with moderate visual impairment than those with healthy central vision, 3 times more likely. Not because their legs are weaker, not because their reaction time is slower, but because their eyes stopped feeding their brain the spatial information it needed to keep them upright. So when you feel that slight uncertainty on the stairs, when you hesitate before stepping off a curb, when you find yourself turning on every light in the house before you move through it at night, that is your nervous system telling you something your eye doctor may not have said out loud yet. Now here is what nobody told you, and this is the part that changes everything. The macula is not a fixed structure. It is not a piece of hardware that degrades and stays degraded. It is a living tissue that is fed by specific pigments. Pigments that your body cannot manufacture on its own, pigments that must come from food, and when those pigments are present in sufficient density, the macula does not just hold its ground. Research shows it can rebuild. It can regain density and restore the precision of the signal it sends to your brain. The window to reverse this is not closed, but what you have been told to eat for the past 3 decades to protect your eyes has been almost completely wrong. The foods that dominate every vision health conversation, the ones on every supplement label, the ones your doctor has probably mentioned, are addressing the wrong biological target entirely. In the next few minutes, you are going to learn which dark leafy greens contain the exact pigment compounds your macula is starving for. You are going to learn why the most powerful of them costs almost nothing, grows in abundance, and has been sitting outside mainstream nutrition advice for decades. And you are going to understand, for the first time, exactly why your balance, your confidence on your feet, and your independence as you age are all downstream of one small structure, at the center of your eye, that you have the power to start feeding correctly beginning tomorrow morning. Before the solution, understand a nutritional myth. It is a myth 30 years in the making. The carrot vision connection was wartime propaganda, used to hide secret radar technology from enemies. The story spread through generations as common sense. Industry built entire supplement categories on this mythology. But beta-carotene does not rebuild macular tissue. Mainstream care manages the decline, not the cause. The real breakthrough comes down to one measurement. It is called macular pigment optical density, MPOD. Most exams miss it, but it is the key. Rebuild your vision by addressing the root cause. Think of the macula as a high-resolution camera lens at the center of your eye. MPOD is the protective filter coating on that lens. This pigment layer is composed almost entirely of two carotenoid compounds, lutein and zeaxanthin, that your body cannot synthesize independently. Every molecule of that protective layer came from something you ate. When dietary intake of lutein and zeaxanthin is insufficient over months and years, eventually the protective macular filter begins to thin. When the filter thins, high-energy blue light and oxidative free radicals penetrate directly into the photoreceptor cells beneath it. The cells absorb damage they were never designed to absorb. Consequently, the photoreceptor cells begin to die. The signal the macula sends to the brain becomes distorted. Visual signals become imprecise and unreliable. Your visual cortex starts working harder to interpret a degraded input. Your cerebellum, the structure in the back of your brain that coordinates balance and spatial orientation, starts receiving corrupted depth data. It compensates. But compensation has a cost. Reaction time slows. Crucial postural adjustments become noticeably delayed. The body starts hesitating in environments it used to navigate automatically. Understand that this hesitation is not a sign of weakness. It is your nervous system doing its best with incomplete information. The enzyme pathway that converts dietary lutein and zeaxanthin into macular pigment. This biological mechanism is remarkably well documented. The research published by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed that increasing serum lutein through targeted food intake measurably increases MPOD within 6 to 12 weeks in adults with documented deficiency. The tissue responds, the filter rebuilds. This is the mechanism, this is the root. Everything else, the blurry text, the hesitation on the stairs, the uncertainty in low light, is a symptom of MPOD collapse, not its cause. And now that you understand what you are actually fighting, the list you are about to hear will make complete sense. In a way that a standard list of healthy foods never could. These are not superfoods pulled from an exotic market in another country. Every single item on this list is available at your local grocery store, at your farmer's market, or growing in a garden village, within driving distance of where you live right now. What separates them from everything else in the produce aisle is not how they look or how much they cost. It is what they contain at the molecular level, and how precisely those molecules interact with the tissue you are trying to rebuild. We are counting down from 5. Pay attention to the preparation details. The difference between a food that rebuilds macular pigment and the same food that does nothing is almost always in how it is handled before it reaches your plate. Coming in at number 5 on our list is broccoli. Most people who eat broccoli regularly believe they are doing something meaningful for their health. And in theory, they are right. Broccoli contains measurable concentrations of lutein along with a compound called sulforaphane, a sulfur-based molecule that activates the NRF2 pathway, the cellular mechanism responsible for producing your body's own antioxidant enzymes inside retinal tissue. But here is what the research actually shows about how most people prepare it. Boiling broccoli in water for longer than 5 minutes destroys up to 78% of its sulforaphane content and leaches a significant portion of its water-soluble protective compounds directly into the cooking water that gets poured down the drain. Most people boil broccoli until it is soft. By the time it is soft enough to eat comfortably, the most therapeutically relevant fraction of what made it worth eating is already gone. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry confirmed that steam exposure of 4 minutes or less preserves sulforaphane activity at levels high enough to measurably upregulate retinal antioxidant response. The key is just 4 minutes. Not until tender, not until a fork slides through easily. 4 minutes from the moment steam contact begins, then immediately removed from heat and eaten while still firm and slightly warm. Eat it that way 3 times per week, and you are delivering a functional dose of sulforaphane to the retinal tissue. Eat it any other way, and you are mostly eating fiber. Number 4, spinach. Spinach has a legitimate claim to being one of the most lutein-dense vegetables available in a standard American grocery store. A single 100-gram serving of cooked spinach contains between 12 and 15 milligrams of lutein, a concentration that puts it well above most other commonly consumed greens. But raw spinach, despite what smoothie culture has been telling you for the past decade, is significantly less effective for this specific purpose. The reason is oxalic acid. Spinach in its raw state contains high concentrations of oxalate compounds that bind directly to lutein and zeaxanthin in the digestive tract. forming insoluble complexes that pass through without being absorbed. You consume the lutein, but your body never actually receives it. It exits the system locked to oxalate before the small intestine ever has a chance to extract it. Light heat application breaks the oxalate bond. 2 to 3 minutes of gentle sautéing is sufficient. But the cooking medium matters enormously. Lutein and zeaxanthin are fat-soluble carotenoids. They require dietary fat present in the same meal to be absorbed through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Research from Iowa State University demonstrated that absorption of carotenoids from leafy greens eaten with no fat source was negligible, compared to absorption when a fat was present. The fat does not need to be large in quantity, but it needs to be a stable, saturated or monounsaturated fat, not a refined, polyunsaturated vegetable oil, which oxidizes at cooking temperatures and introduces free radicals into the same meal you are trying to use for retinal repair. Cook spinach briefly. Use butter, ghee, or extra virgin olive oil. Added after the heat is reduced. Eat it warm. Done correctly, 2 cups of prepared spinach 3 times per week delivers a lutein load that the NIH-funded AREDS-2 trial identified as clinically associated with a 43% reduction in progression risk for intermediate age-related macular degeneration. Number 3 on our list is red kale. Standard green kale is a well-documented source of lutein, but the variety most people buy at the grocery store, the dark green curly or lacinato varieties, contains relatively low concentrations of zeaxanthin, which is the second critical pigment required for macular reconstruction. Lutein and zeaxanthin are not interchangeable. They deposit in different regions of the macula. Lutein concentrates in the peripheral macular zone. Zeaxanthin concentrates at the very center, the fovea, which is responsible for the sharp central vision you use to read, recognize faces, and judge distances precisely. Red kale, distinguished by its deep purple-red pigmentation, contains both compounds at elevated concentrations. The red and purple coloration is itself a sign of anthocyanin accumulation, a separate class of polyphenol that works synergistically with zeaxanthin to suppress inflammatory cytokines in the choroidal blood vessels that supply oxygen to the macula. When those vessels are inflamed, nutrient delivery to the macular tissue is reduced. Anthocyanins reduce that inflammation and open the delivery pathway. A clinical study featured in the Journal of Nutrition tracked adults over 60 who consumed red kale 3 times per week for 8 weeks. Measured MPOD scores in that group increased by an average of 37% compared to baseline. The control group consuming no additional leafy greens showed no significant change. 37% MPOD improvement in 8 weeks from a vegetable that costs less than $3 per bunch. The preparation method that maximizes zeaxanthin bioavailability requires one additional step that most recipes skip entirely. Before cooking, take the raw leaves and massage them firmly with a small amount of coarse sea salt for approximately 90 seconds. This physical pressure ruptures the cell walls of the leaf tissue, releasing zeaxanthin from the chloroplast structures where it is bound in its less bioavailable form. After massaging, rinse lightly, then sauté briefly in olive oil over medium heat for no more than 3 minutes. The difference in bioavailability between massaged and unmassaged kale has been documented at roughly double in controlled absorption studies. Number 2, flatleaf parsley. This is the entry on this list that most people will dismiss immediately, and that is precisely why it belongs here. Parsley is used almost universally as a garnish, a decorative sprig placed on a plate and left untouched. The average restaurant serving of parsley contains less than 2 grams of the plant, a quantity so small it has zero biological relevance. The culinary world has accidentally buried one of the most targeted retinal support compounds by treating the plant as decoration rather than medicine. Flatleaf parsley, not the curly variety, contains 2 flavonoid compounds that operate through a distinct mechanism, completely distinct from lutein and zeaxanthin. The first is apigenin, the second is luteolin. Together, these compounds directly inhibit an enzyme called matrix metalloproteinase 2, abbreviated MMP2. MMP2 is the enzyme responsible for degrading the basement membrane of the retinal pigment epithelium, the structural layer beneath the photoreceptors. That acts as the foundation of the entire macular architecture. When MMP2 activity is elevated, which it reliably is in aging tissue, Under oxidative stress, the basement membrane begins to break down. Fluid leaks beneath the retina and drusen deposits accumulate. The photoreceptors above lose their structural support and begin to detach. Apigenin and luteolin essentially cut off the enzyme's ability to dissolve that membrane. They do not just feed the macula. They stop the active destruction of the structure the macula sits on. A study published in the European Journal of Ophthalmology in 2020 found that daily consumption of 15 grams of fresh flat-leaf parsley, roughly one small handful, was associated with a 29% reduction in subretinal fluid accumulation. Over a 12-week period in adults with macular degeneration, 15 grams, one handful, every day. It must be fresh. Dried parsley loses the majority of its compounds. During the drying and storage process, it must be consumed in a way that allows the flavonoids to reach the small intestine. The most effective delivery method is to finely chop the fresh leaves. Combine them with approximately 200 milliliters of water. Warm to around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, which degrades the flavonoids. And consume this on an empty stomach at least 30 minutes before your first meal. This timing allows absorption to occur without competition from other dietary compounds. Everything on this list has been building toward this. Every compound discussed so far, the sulforaphane in broccoli, the free-form lutein in spinach, the zeaxanthin and anthocyanins in red kale, the MMP2 inhibiting flavonoids in parsley. Each of these works on one specific part of the macular architecture. They are precise, they are effective, but they are each addressing a single mechanism within a complex, multi-layered biological system. What comes next addresses the entire system simultaneously. And it does so through a plant that's spinning. Most Americans walk past without a second glance. A plant that gardeners pull out of the ground and discard because they assume it has no value. A plant so common, so overlooked, and so inexpensive that the idea of it being the most lutein and zeaxanthin dense leafy green available in North America sounds at first almost impossible to believe. The number one food on this list is amaranth leaves. Not amaranth grain, not amaranth flour. The leaves of the amaranth plant, known in many parts of the American South and across Central America as callaloo, pigweed, or simply wild amaranth, a broadleaf green that grows abundantly in backyards, along roadsides and in community gardens from late spring through early fall across most of the continental United States. Here is the contrast that matters: a 100-gram serving of commercial green kale. The variety, most commonly marketed as a Vision Health superfood, contains approximately 8 to 10 milligrams of lutein and zeaxanthin combined. That same 100-gram serving of fresh amaranth leaves contains between 43 and 51 milligrams of lutein and zeaxanthin combined, according to USDA nutritional analysis data. That is not a marginal difference. That is a concentration gap of 4 to 5 times in favor of a plant that costs nothing to grow and is actively removed from most gardens as a weed. But the concentration advantage is only part of the story. The more important distinction is the molecular form in which the lutein exists inside amaranth leaf tissue. Most dietary lutein, including the lutein in spinach, kale, and broccoli, exists in a bound form called lutein ester, where the lutein molecule is attached to a fatty acid chain within the plant cell structure. Before your body can absorb it, intestinal enzymes must first cleave the ester bond to release the free-form lutein molecule. This conversion step is metabolically costly and highly variable between individuals. Digestive efficiency, age-related enzyme decline, gut microbiome composition, and the fat content of the meal all influence how much of the bound lutein actually converts to the free form available for absorption. In older adults with compromised digestive function, which describes a significant portion of the population, this information is most relevant for the conversion efficiency can be as low as 20 to 30% of the theoretical maximum. Amaranth leaves contain an unusually high proportion of lutein in its free, unbound form. Research published in the journal Food Chemistry confirmed that the free-form lutein fraction in amaranth leaf extract showed intestinal absorption rates approximately 3 times higher than the lutein ester fraction. Found in standard commercial greens under equivalent digestive conditions, the molecule is already in the form your intestinal wall can transport directly into the bloodstream without the conversion step. It bypasses the inefficiency. It reaches the retinal tissue faster and in greater concentration. This is not a subtle pharmacokinetic advantage. For an adult over 50 whose digestive conversion capacity has diminished with age, the difference between consuming lutein that requires efficient ester cleavage and consuming lutein that arrives pre-converted is the difference between a therapeutic dose and a subtherapeutic one, between rebuilding macular pigment density and simply consuming green vegetables without measurable effect on the tissue that needs it most. Now connect this back to the root mechanism identified earlier. MPOD collapse drives retinal signal degradation. Retinal signal degradation corrupts the depth information your brain receives. Corrupted depth information destabilizes the balance system coordinated by the cerebellum. As a result, postural compensation mechanisms slow. Reaction time to unexpected surface changes decreases. This is exactly how falls happen, and falls in adults over 65 carry consequences: fractured hips, traumatic brain injuries, extended hospitalizations, loss of independent living that are devastating and frequently irreversible. When free-form lutein and zeaxanthin from amaranth leaves are absorbed and deposited into macular tissue at concentrations sufficient to rebuild MPOD, the signal the macula sends to the visual cortex becomes cleaner and more precise. The brain receives accurate depth information again, and then the cerebellum recalibrates. Your postural reflexes then sharpen. The hesitation on the stairs begins to disappear. The uncertainty in low light begins to resolve. The body starts moving through space with the confidence that comes from a nervous system receiving the input it needs to do its job correctly. This is not a vision supplement. This is a neurological recalibration that begins in the eye and radiates outward into every physical movement you make throughout the day. Preparation for amaranth leaves is straightforward. Fresh young leaves, harvested or purchased when the plant is between 8 and 14 inches tall, before it flowers, are the most potent. Older leaves from mature plants contain elevated concentrations of oxalic acid similar to spinach, which ultimately reduces absorption efficiency. Young leaves can be lightly sautéed in butter or olive oil for 2 to 3 minutes, added to soups in the final 2 minutes of cooking, or blended raw into a morning preparation with a small amount of healthy fat to maximize carotenoid absorption. If fresh amaranth leaves are not immediately accessible in your area, look for them at Caribbean, West African, Southeast Asian, or Latin American grocery stores, where they are commonly sold under names including callaloo, Chinese spinach, or bhaji. They are almost universally inexpensive, frequently under $2 per large bunch, because mainstream American grocery culture has not yet caught up to the nutritional literature on this plant. The gap between what the research says and what ends up on the shelves of a standard American supermarket is often a decade or more. Amaranth leaves are living proof of that gap, is often a decade or more. The most powerful macular rebuilding food available to you is not behind a pharmacy counter. It is not in a bottle with a clinical-looking label and a $40 price tag. It is in a garden. It is at an ethnic grocery store 3 miles from where you are sitting right now, and it has been there the entire time. You now have the mechanism, and now you have the full list. You have the preparation details that separate a therapeutic dose from a decorative garnish. But information without a system disappears within 48 hours. You read it, you feel motivated, and then life happens. And the broccoli gets boiled soft, and the parsley gets left on the plate, and the amaranth leaves never make it into your grocery cart because you forgot the name by the time you got to the store. So here is the system. Simple enough to remember without writing it down. Specific enough to produce measurable results if you actually follow it. Introducing the steps of the daily protocol. Every morning, before you eat anything else, take 1 small handful of fresh flat leaf parsley, roughly 15 grams, chop it finely and combine it with 8 ounces of water, warmed to approximately 100 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, warm enough that you would not want to hold your hand under the tap at that temperature for more than a few seconds. Stir it, let it sit for 2 minutes, and drink it. This is your morning MMP2 inhibitor. It goes into an empty digestive system where it can be absorbed without interference. It begins protecting the structural foundation of your macular architecture before anything else enters your body that day. Then eat your breakfast, whatever your normal breakfast is. Add a small amount of healthy fat if it does not already contain one, a slice of avocado, a teaspoon of butter on toast, a soft boiled egg. Fat is the transport vehicle for every carotenoid you will consume today. Without fat in the meal, lutein and zeaxanthin absorption drops to near zero, regardless of how much you consume. In the evening, with your main meal, rotate through the remaining 4 greens. Across the week, Monday and Thursday, saute a generous handful of fresh amaranth leaves or spinach in butter or olive oil for 2 to 3 minutes. Tuesday and Friday, steam broccoli florets for exactly 4 minutes and eat them while still firm. Wednesday and Saturday, massage red kale with coarse salt for 90 seconds. Rinse, then saute briefly in olive oil. Sunday is your rest day from the protocol. Use it to source and prepare your greens, so the protocol does not collapse under the friction of daily decision-making. That is the entire system, 2 components per day: morning parsley water, evening rotating greens with fat. Please stay consistent for the next 30 days. What to expect in the first week? In the first 3 to 5 days of this protocol, some people notice that their urine takes on a slightly deeper yellow or amber tone than usual. This is normal. It is not a sign of dehydration or kidney stress. It is the result of elevated carotenoid and flavonoid metabolites being processed and excreted, as your body begins clearing oxidized compounds from retinal and vascular tissue. It resolves on its own as the system adjusts, typically within the first week. Some people also experience mild bloating or a sense of fullness in the lower abdomen during the first few days, particularly if their current diet is low in fiber. This is the digestive system adapting to a significant increase in plant-based roughage and polyphenol load. It is not a reaction to avoid. It is a sign that the gut microbiome is responding to a new substrate. Drink an additional glass of water in the morning during the first week to support that transition. One important note for a specific group of people: if you are currently taking a blood-thinning medication, most commonly warfarin, sold under the brand name Coumadin, dark leafy greens consumed in the quantities described in this protocol will interact with your medication's effectiveness because of their high vitamin K content. This does not mean you cannot follow the protocol. It means you need to keep your green intake consistent day to day rather than fluctuating, and you should inform your prescribing physician that you are increasing your leafy green consumption so that your INR levels can be monitored and your dosage adjusted if necessary. Consistency is the key word. A stable daily intake of vitamin K is manageable. An erratic intake that spikes some days and disappears on others is what creates dangerous fluctuation in anticoagulation therapy. Welcome to the 30-day challenge. Let's begin. Here is what I want you to do before you go to sleep tonight. Find something with text on it that is slightly challenging to read at your normal distance. A medication label, the fine print at the bottom of a utility bill, a restaurant menu in medium-sized font. Hold it at the distance you normally read without glasses, or with your regular reading glasses if you wear them. Notice how clearly you can make out the individual letters. Notice whether the center of the text looks slightly washed out, or whether the edges of the letters bleed slightly into the background. Take a photograph of that text sample and write down today's date on a piece of paper next to it in the frame. This data point is your baseline measurement. Then do the same thing again on day 15 and day 30. You are not looking for a dramatic transformation in 2 weeks. What you are looking for is a directional change, a slight reduction in the effort required to resolve fine detail, a small increase in the contrast you perceive between letters and background, a morning where you walk down the hallway to the kitchen and your feet feel more certain of the floor beneath them than they did the morning before. These are the early signals that MPOD is beginning to rebuild. They are subtle. They will not look like a miracle, but they are measurable and they are real. And they are the beginning of a trajectory that, sustained over 6 to 12 months, the clinical literature consistently shows leads to meaningful, documented improvement in both visual acuity and postural stability in adults with documented macular pigment deficiency. Keep a small notebook, a pocket-sized one you can leave on your kitchen counter, and write 3 numbers in it every morning for 30 days. The first number is how many times you hesitated or reached for support while navigating stairs or uneven surfaces the previous day. The second number is your subjective rating from 1 to 10 of how clear your central vision felt when you woke up. The third number is whether you completed both components of the protocol the day before, morning parsley water and evening greens. Yes or no. That is it. 3 data points, 30 seconds per morning. At the end of 30 days, you will have a document that shows you, in your own handwriting, in your own numbers, whether this protocol is producing a measurable effect on your body. Not a testimonial from someone you have never met. Not a before and after photograph staged under controlled lighting. Your own data, collected from your own experience, in your own kitchen, with vegetables that cost less than a single copay at your eye doctor's office. Start tomorrow morning, not next Monday, not after you finish the groceries you already have. Tomorrow morning. The parsley is at the grocery store. The amaranth leaves are at the market 3 miles away. The broccoli is already in your refrigerator. The macula responds to what you feed it. It always has. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you are feeding it what it actually needs. Now you know what that is.